So I will go ahead and call the meeting to order under the Albemarle County Continuity of Government Ordinance that allows for remote participation as well as in-person participation for board and committee meetings like this. Our first order of business will be adopting minutes from last month. Did everybody have a chance to take a look at those?
Yes.
Do I hear a motion to approve those?
So moved.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Do any board members have any announcements they'd like to make? Do we have any public who wishes to make comments? Yes, David.
I have two introductions I'd like to make virtually here. One, joining us on the call is Kayla Payne, JMRL's new Collections and Technology Manager. And because of the size of the room, Kayla is in her office at the Central Library. But if you don't mind, I'd like to allow her just to speak for a moment.
Of course. Thank you so much for joining us, Kayla. Welcome.
Okay, Kayla, you're muted. There you go.
Hello, thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here and look forward to getting to know you all.
Absolutely. Welcome to the organization.
Thank you.
Okay, and I wanted to have Anne come in and say hi too, but she
Sure.
may be busy.
A lot of people.
Yeah, it's
It's a teacher work day, so.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I have ours is Thursday, Friday.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, my older kid just started kindergarten, so this is his very first experience with the teacher works day, and he's loving it.
Yeah.
Hi, thank you so much for hosting us here.
Oh, of course. Thank you guys so much for coming. So let me see how I can be in a place where you can all see me.
Yeah, pretty good.
I am delighted that you're all here, and I'm also delighted to be the branch manager of the Scottsdale Library. I started back in May, and I love this community because I've been working here previously, and it's just been a delight. And I love what we already have here, and I'm also really looking forward to what we can do in the future. So.
Thank you.
And
So
so make sure to eat a lot of food. If anyone's gluten-free, I got gluten-free Oreos too. So.
much. Thank you.
Welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much, and let us know what we can do to be helpful, supportive going forward. But we're really excited. Thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure.
Thank you, Anne. Thanks for hosting.
Take care, of course.
I just wanted to ask if the gluten-free Oreos were available for home delivery. We don't see, I don't know about Jim or Wendy, but those of us virtually meeting, I don't know anybody else. Well, I checked the porch when you went to the door and there's no Oreos here. So you might want to look into that about like how you're going to accommodate those of us.
I will make a note for the next traveling meeting. We will make sure to.
I'm
thank you.
teasing, but thank you. It's welcome.
Okay, so if there is no public comment, in addition to the announcements, then David, do we see any?
I do not. I see staff members. If there's anybody here for a public comment, you can raise your hand on Zoom and we will give you speaking capability.
Okay. Well, moving on in the agenda, David and I have been talking a little bit about the continuing education, and I do want to get back to inside the organization type presentations as we've done in the past. I think that those are really helpful, but still, want to keep one eye on that series of videos, since it seemed at least tepidly and useful in our last meeting. So with a couple of new members joining us here, we thought that it might be useful to just go back to that well one more time for the what it means to be a trustee video, which I'll ask David to go ahead and queue up. So this will be another about 10-minute presentation, and then we can have a little conversation afterwards if there's any questions or comments about it. And then next month, we'll probably look to get back to another presentation from staff on something topical. So thank you very much, David.
Okay, let's see. Oh, oops. Let's see.
When you go into screen share, you have to allow for the audio. So I
Yeah.
like stop sharing and then I try again. Make sure you check that box.
Let's try that. Let's stop share.
Are you using a lot of-
Hmm.
There's some kind of
Hey, Kathy, good to see you.
maybe see.
Hi, Kathy. Thank you for
Hi,
joining
Kathy.
us.
You click on sharing. It should be share sound.
Sound. Thank
There
you,
we go.
Mary.
I'm here all the time.
Tech support courtesy of.
Thank you. Thank you.
Novolinsky, the Director of Marketing and Communications for United for
There's a
Libraries.
problem.
We are the
Thank you for
division
clearing
of the
up.
American Library Association for
let's not do.
trustees, advocates, friends, and foundations.
Share sound, not to mention video.
Well, maybe it's something
to ensure that best practices are used to deliver service.
Could it just be your computer itself has the video, the
Yeah, I tried that.
volume down?
Services and programs that the community wants and needs to grow intellectually and to have a
Well,
quality of life.
well, if we
that
can get this
certainly
figured
these are
out.
available.
citizens and
Yeah.
Device.
full
Kayla
participants
says I can hear the
in
audio
their
just
local
fine.
government and to
I can hear as
enjoy,
well.
life.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
We can't hear.
Is there a
anything.
difference between governing boards and advisory boards?
There is a difference. It's a pretty big difference, actually. Governing boards have the full responsibility for all
light is
assets of the
blinking.
Yeah, red light is
library.
blinking, but I don't see anything.
That's their fiduciary responsibility. It means
Okay, well,
that
if
they
this isn't
hire,
working
evaluate, and
for
can fire the library
everybody,
director. The
and it
library
seems like we're
director
having
has
some
a
technical
direct
difficulties here in
report
the
to
room.
them.
We can circulate the
They're
link and just
typically
ask
elected at
if you all
large
don't mind
by the
sometime
community, or
on your
else
own
they're
time, taking 10
appointed
minutes
by
here to
the
watch the
governing
video
body
and,
of their entity, whether it's
bring
county
any
or
questions
city.
to next month's
And
meeting.
again,
Does that seem fair?
his or her comment.
Yeah, I'm sorry
And
about
then
that. My
if that
apologies.
doesn't
We'll
satisfy
take a
the
look and see
person
what the
who
problem
is
is.
challenging,
No
it
problem.
can go to the
Yeah, it worked when
board.
I showed it earlier,
If
but I guess it wasn't
that-
through Zoom.
Zoom makes
Fun with
it more
technology.
challenging.
Okay, well,
We
sorry
didn't-
to
we did
leave
not
you
get
all.
any. So we didn't get any Oreos, but we got to get the video and.
That's right, yeah.
No, I'm just saying that this is very interesting. I'm not sure on balance what I'm more excited about, but
We'll try to make it up to you by the end. Okay, so leaving the continuing education behind there, we don't have any committee reports today. And I'm going to do some committee appointments, assignments later on the agenda. So we'll move right along there to new business. David, you want to kick off the discussion here about budget objectives?
Sure. So annually around this time, staff, and we've already begun work on putting together a fiscal year 23 budget. And we look to the board and to the 5-year plan for some objective setting so that we make sure that you all are on board with the way that the staff are moving, that the staff are recognizing what your priorities and the priorities of the jurisdictions that you represent are. The main focus of budget work to this point has been to try to get to a $15 minimum wage for JMRL staff beginning in July of next year, which is next fiscal year. And as we discussed last month, there's a plan in place in order to kind of roll that out over 3 years so that the jurisdictions won't be absorbing the cost of that all at once. They'll be able to do that over a 3-year period. And the board approved that plan. So we're moving forward with that. But I would like to get a sense of the priorities there for the library board. Is that the top objective budget objective that you all have, and the budget committee and the personnel committee will both discuss as well. But we are also looking at compensation for staff, for the rest of staff. We were able to give a 2% cost of living raise this current fiscal year. There was none last year for fiscal year 21. But before that, we've been able to give that for a few years. So I'm interested in hearing from the board so whether or not those would be the budget objectives that staff should be following, because that's where we are right now, basically.
Okay. Thoughts from anybody?
Staff are crucial, so we'd like to do the right thing and get them at the right levels, and also try and get back as funding permits to some of those historic raises. So that's great. And I would also say, of course, the big picture for me is we should maximize service, whatever that means, you know, with whatever resources we have or can obtain. So I think we just maintained a constant in terms of hours, which is sort of this the baseline. We're sort of back to pre-pandemic hours, is my understanding, and we're maintaining that. So that would be a key objective for me, but it seems like that's baked into your plan.
To maintain current service level.
At least at a minimum.
Yes, at a minimum, yes,
But
absolutely.
I think it's worth explicitly
Sure.
stating that that's
Agreed.
kind of a fundamental purpose of the life.
I had
Sorry,
a
go ahead.
question.
Yeah, Wendy.
I just wanted to know what were the various responses you got, David? Was it a positive response from staff and others when our 3-year plan was approved, or did any?
But we haven't started shopping it to the jurisdictions yet. The first that they'll hear about it is the meeting in October, where the staff from each of the 5 jurisdictions that form JMRL will get together. And then, once this board approves the budget in November, we'll start taking it around to the staff and the elected officials from each of our jurisdictions. So at this point, the plan's been shared publicly, of course, in this body and with this board and with library staff, mostly at the managers meeting we've discussed. We have an in-service day coming up that I'll talk about in a little bit, in which we'll go over it as well. So there's wide support from staff in order to get to where we need to be here. And of course, the other issue now is about recruiting and retention, where it's very difficult to compete for staff, basically, in the environment that we're in the whole region, without being able to pay a $15 minimum wage. So, but as far as our jurisdictional partners, Wendy, the discussion about that is just getting started.
No, I was thinking more in-house. I mean,
Yeah, in-house, I have heard a lot of positive response. And I think that the move that happened this year to get to $11, which is the first step in the states rung the ladders, basically, that happened in July, and we got positive response from the folks that were affected by that. So I think that the folks that are going to be, I think total about 50 staff members will be affected by this adjustment. And I would expect that most of them will be grateful for it, as long as they also understand that they're not being leapfrogged by anybody, that we're trying to keep it as fair as possible so that your years of service are taken into account and where you are currently in the pay scale is taken into account, so that somebody doesn't start sooner, more recently than you and jump over you there.
And David, one thing you and I talked about as we were putting this agenda together was the central branch renovation, which is of course operationally a big objective, but not in our operations budget.
Correct.
Organizationally, I should say, a big focus, but not in our operations budget. So, it's not something we need to set here, discuss here necessarily, but if anybody else was curious, as I was, just wanted to clarify that this is, yeah, those capital discussions are, you know, part of the ongoing conversations we need to have with the funding jurisdictions about where their priorities are.
And that one would be solely Charlottesville and Albemarle.
Right.
It's a 50-50 Charlottesville Albemarle owned building.
But that's a good question. In terms of planning and pulling, you know, architectural plans off the shelf and getting those back up to date and sort of cost assessments and so forth. How did those initial kind of startup, if you will, costs get funded? Is that a budget thing we need to consider?
That would be a budget thing that we would consider. I think in the past, JMRL has reached out for support from the Friends of the Library and the Friends of the Library Foundation on that. The last time there was a design study done for the Central Library. The Friends of the Library Endowment paid for it. And we, Krista and AJ and I met with that architectural firm to ask them to give us a quote on what it would cost to update that plan. And once we have kind of an idea of the timing and the costs of that, we could either go back to Charlottesville and Albemarle and potentially all jurisdictions for it, or we could ask the Friends if they would consider funding this as a separate project. I know the Friends have had some interest in that.
It sounds most likely based on that interest and the historic track record that would sort of be handled as a one-off, most likely end up being handled as a one-off from the front.
Yeah, and it might not be, it has been a few years, but because of some of the renovations that the city and the county have done on the building, it might be almost like a new project, or at least going in with fresh eyes. So yes, we have started talking to an architectural firm. I've not talked to the Friends about this yet, but have contacted the city of Charlottesville and our liaison there to talk about moving this forward. And the goal for this year is to try to get a working group together, members of the public, board members, Friends, members, I would hope staff from the city and the county to discuss and move forward. So the project for the city's end is currently unfunded. It's on their list of unfunded projects, and it's third on the list. It's making its way up, but it's not clear if that's actually a prioritized list or not.
Okay, so
I think Wendy might have a question.
Oh yes, I'm sorry, Wendy.
That's, David, just checking with you. You were pursuing, seeing if you could get some grant money, correct?
Yeah.
Or some of the stimulus or the federal library support money?
So we are getting some, the ARPA money that went to the state library, but it's going to kind of regional costs. We had discussed the lockers and a few other things. So for this, we had been hoping and advocating for the Build American Libraries funding to come through. That would be part of this, part of the stimulus package. And it's along with the rest of kind of infrastructure and other things like that, it's a little held up right now. And it's not clear whether or not that funding is going to be available. If it is, then we would likely apply for grants directly from the feds there. But there are always opportunities, Wendy, other things come our way that we would pursue if they could fit the scale of what we're trying to do. But we have to have the building owners on board with the project and ready to go, basically.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Remember the Build America.
David, can you switch the Zoom control to panelists just in case? I don't think we can see if somebody uses those raise hands.
Thank you. Okay, so refocusing a little bit on the discussion around the operational budget priorities, maintaining current service levels, pursuing the 3-year plan for wage adjustments. Is there anything else anybody would like to discuss adding to that list?
I mean, usually one of the things that's an extra request to jurisdictions is increased hours at branches, try to get us up to, what is that, AA level at the state. But I think in this case, it's more important for just service to keep the compensation first and foremost in the budget. Because I think that if we don't have that, then we can't offer the hours anyway. So, if we don't have enough staff, we can't offer the hours. So I think that sort of I'd say that would take a back burner to the compensation piece.
And Tony, just for your information, that they don't call it AA anymore. They changed it to something else. It's EE or something like that. But JMRL is at those service levels now in terms of
Good.
hours. So we're at the middle of those three. You know, the excellence one is the next step up.
Got it. That makes that, it's actually, that sounds better, David. Yes.
I just wanted to add that one of my questions was about like morale and in response to this. And I just wanted to say that I appreciate you paying attention to the issue of compression, because salary compression, that, you know, the idea of someone leapfrogging over you, someone hired after you, making more, all of these different things can be really demoralizing at times. And so I appreciate you know, paying attention to that. And I was just wondering if you get a sense that there is a feeling that this is, that we're doing everything that we can to make sure people feel that they're valued and compensated ethically, ethically.
Yeah, and this, while we're taking care of the leapfrogging and we're moving everybody under $17 is going to move up in order to kind of keep their relative place in the pay scale, Lisa. This is going to create compression problems moving forward. So
Okay.
Once this project is done, then we are back to the compression issues. So my sense, and I don't have any data to back this up, but my sense from staff organizationally is that everybody supports this move and recognizes that JMRL needs to be offering the $15 minimum wage, but that that middle to higher salaries at the library are not where they need to be in comparison with peer libraries across the state. So
Okay.
basically, you know, we're choosing to focus on this project now, but that project has to be next.
Okay, great. No, that's good to know. The idea that this is not a one and done and moving on, that this is still part of a larger process to get things to rights. So that makes sense. Thank you.
And it's effectively, not that it's never ending, but like the as we move forward, we're constantly going to have to be evaluating the pay scale.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
And I hope that Carla's hard work on this in the past has demonstrated a bit of goodwill and effort, you know, that this is something, you know, we see and care about and pay attention to organizationally.
Yeah, I think that staff feels very supported by the board in that sense, and also by looking at Carla's work, has seen that what's possible, what's
Right.
achievable.
Right. It's a process.
Yeah, it's a process, that's for sure.
And just to go back to the salary penetration thing, the discussion we had around that, it sounded like a lot of that is funded by the expected staffing shortages that we currently have, right?
It's funded by our current general fund, which is largely made up of
Right.
staffing shortages historically.
I
So
should say-
this year's and prior years.
I should say we're funding it out of the general fund, but we're funding it to a level that would deplete the general fund in the next 3 years if we weren't expecting to be
Some amount of salary savings.
putting money
correct.
back into
Yeah,
it, right?
yeah.
So I just think that's an interesting thing that I'd like to make sure we sort of keep an eye on as we move through this over the next few years, because it feels to me very much like there's a balance there to strike between, you know, we want to improve all of these things, and hopefully that loosens up the hiring. As you said, you know, it's a difficult environment to be hiring in.
Yes.
I want to make sure that we have money to fund all of this and don't make these jobs so appealing that all of a sudden we've lost all. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I think that if that's the case, then we need to have open conversations with our jurisdictions about that. We would also need to rely on, you know, our outside funding sources and things like that. You know, based on the last 20 years of fiscal data, this is going to be not an issue at all. But
I would expect.
But we have always, JMRL has always budgeted extremely conservatively when it comes to personnel. So budgeted for every position filled for the year. You know, we're not going to have any openings, and that's how this happens. And this is our first foray into taking some of those funds and putting them back into the organization. So we certainly will have to keep a very close watch on it.
And I think that kind of problem that hypothetical problem that I'm describing would be one of this being too successful. And so I would hope if the program is that successful, that we could go to the funding jurisdictions and say, look, this is
Yeah.
really creating the response that we needed as an organization to get people back in these positions. Will you please help us fund this change?
Yeah, and I
Because,
think all 5 of them are going to be facing some version of
Right.
this same conversation.
Because
So
it's a state mandate.
it's not new. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think we have a really good plan there to put forward on our own terms to try to make this happen. I hope that that's convincing to the funding jurisdictions. But yeah, I just want to keep a close eye on it as we move forward and see how that balance stays. Okay, David, have we missed any priorities as you see them?
I think that, there are some individual priorities in the 5-year plan that the Personnel Committee will be discussing. Like there's some priorities tied to outreach services that are going to lead to a request for personnel. So that will come back in front of the board. But in terms of the overall picture for the work that administrative staff needs to do right now, we need to know, is this the board's priority to get to this $15 minimum wage? And then is it a board priority to get to a 2% at least compensate, cost of living raise? And then if we were to have to make choices between those two, which we don't have to do now as we're constructing this, but later in the year, then the board might have to weigh in on which one of those two is a priority versus other services and needs. But we don't have to set that now. We can use this data to move forward and then revisit it.
Okay, is everybody comfortable with that?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. All right, well, we'll turn the page on budget objectives then. David, what can you tell us about centennial events?
Okay, just to keep everybody in the loop, this is 100 years of library service in the Charlottesville area. And the big event, which I've mentioned to you numerous times, is the film Free and Open to the Public by local filmmaker Lorenzo Dickerson. We do have an event date for this now. So October 21st, 2021, that's how I remember, it's 10/21/21. The film will make its premiere at the Paramount Theater at 7 p.m. It will be free and open to the public, but ticketing is required. So if you plan on attending in person, you'd have to go and reserve a ticket through the Paramount's website. They do have some venue policies in place. I'm assuming we might be in the same situation at the end of October, a month from now, but currently they are requiring masking in your seats, and they are also requiring vaccination at the door. So you have to show a vaccination card at the door. So at the same time, we'll make it available on DVD and hopefully also offer online streaming so that it's really free and open to the public. Prior to the film showing at 7 p.m. on the 21st, there'll be an open house at the Central Library for the exhibit that is up on the 3rd floor. That's about 100 years of library service from 5 to 7. Normally we would have an event with food or whatnot. Likely it will just be more come in, see it, and move on. And following the film at the Paramount, there'll be a conversation with the filmmaker and myself, moderated by Tom Chapman, the executive director of the Albemarle Charlottesville Historical Society, talking about 100 years of library service. So that's kind of the capstone event on a year that JMRL has spent looking at the last 100 years, looking at what service has been throughout that period, and making that available to the public the best ways that we know how, which is to provide resources and materials about it. So everyone is cordially invited. If you have any questions about the specifics, I'm happy to take them.
Any questions?
Did
Well,
you?
One question. I went right out and got a ticket and then realized I'm teaching that night. So
Are you trying to scalp it, Tony?
who knows? Anyway, anyone needs a ticket? I have one. So
Lisa, you had a question too?
I did. I think I was just wondering about, so it's not going to be live streamed, because David, you mentioned that you'll make it available later. There doesn't seem to be a good way to do it in at the theater and live streamed at the same time. Like that doesn't seem possible.
Simultaneously, no, it doesn't seem like that's going to be an option. The film might be available simultaneously to watch, but the discussion afterwards, I think, is not going to be live streamed. So we're working with Lorenzo. Lorenzo has a platform for his films, and we're working on trying to figure out how to make that available. The other option, which I'll get to in my director's report, is that Lorenzo is going to be attending the virtual only all staff in-service day on the 11th to show a preview to library staff, and all trustees are invited to that as well. And that will be via Zoom. So I got to make sure to figure out that audio issue that we just had before then. It might not be at least at that point, some of the credits and things might not quite be on there. Lorenzo's still finishing up filming too.
Great, great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you, David, and thank you to all the staff who have worked on that. I'm sure there was a ton of work going into that. Sounds like it's going to be a really great event.
It's gonna be fun.
Okay, moving on then to old business. Michael, do you want to walk us through the latest revision of the non-discrimination policy?
Sure.
Thank you.
So in your handouts, you have the latest revision, version 3. We read this last meeting, and just as a quick review, because now there's 4 colors in the document. The black color was language recommended to us by Dan Morrell's counsel, who recommended that we do adopt a policy of this sort. Then the City of Charlottesville lawyer gave it a look over and added the green adjustments. The policy committee looked it over and added the red adjustments. If I'm correct here. Yes. And then and the policy committee then recommended the version, that version to the board. And so it's in the board's hands at that point. It doesn't really go back necessarily to the policy committee for a full review. Last month, we had a little bit of discussion about just the 1 or 2 wording changes, but then just overall flow. And so we took that back offline with an excellent assist from Alita, who redid some things. Or suggested some specific adjustments. And this is what's come back out after some back and forth with David and myself, and then Alita had another crack at it as well. So this is it's really the same contents, but hopefully organized in a more accessible form, where we have an initial just statement of concept. And then sort of one comment was, well, we're trying to do several things with this at once. And so that turns into 3 bullet points that kind of makes it clear that, yes, we are doing several things with this at once, and here are the things. And then after the bullets, it kind of turns back into the process aspect. Here are the things we're accomplishing, and for patrons or employees who see some sort of violation.
Here's the process.
Here's the process. So I think that from that standpoint, it flows more freely or more easily. And I promise once all the strikeouts are removed, it will even look, I think it'll be a little bit shorter. So I think it's open for discussion. Open for discussion.
I really, I just want to commend you guys. I think the beginning statement and the end makes it a lot stronger.
Okay, great.
And very clear. And I like the way it flows down. So thank you for
Great.
continuing to.
Thank
to
you
work
for
on it.
everyone for the input. This one is a little more tricky because it was a legal. Usually we don't need to run things by the lawyers, but I should have said after the blue language that you see, we did. David did get a review by City of Charlottesville.
Yeah.
And got the thumbs up on that. So
yeah, they signed up.
That was the only maybe issue. We originally were trying to stick closely to the lawyerly language, which is not necessarily the
easiest to
not necessarily a readability.
Yeah.
So
okay. Well, we had a fairly in-depth discussion about it last month. But before we move to take a vote, any other questions or comments? Doesn't sound like it. All right, well, do I hear a motion? Oh, I'm sorry. Wendy, I'm sorry, we didn't see you there.
I'm
We had a
sorry.
hand
I'm looking for the raise hand thing. If we go back to the final one, there's a J missing on the last bullet.
And she takes the edits off somehow and Jay went away.
Oh, let's see.
I saw that too.
Yes.
Oh, MRL, you're right, yeah.
We have to be inclusive.
That's right, yeah.
We need all-
Great.
we need all.
Thank you, okay. Do I hear a motion to approve the draft version 3 of the non-discrimination policy 2.13?
I move that we accept the third draft of this policy, as you just said.
Thank you very much.
Is that the third?
With the J, right.
With the J.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you all very much. The motion will carry. All right, now we will finally wrap up the 2 pieces of business here that I've been punting on. Thank you all so much for your patience. David, could you pull up the self-evaluation? And we'll just scroll through those results quickly. Thank you all. If you had a chance to do this, if you did not, I hope you get something from it as we go through it here today. But I don't want to spend too much time on this. I think that the new format largely did its intended job and consolidated our answers. There was one section, David, if you scroll down, I think it was the second or third section where we seem to kind of have the most of the not enough information to answer. And it was related to some of the tasks of being a board member. So I just wanted to kind of pause on that one. Yeah, here we go. Conversations about attendance, and scrolling down, I think there were a couple others that popped up here. Maybe this isn't the one. Advocates' responsibilities.
So those were all not enough info.
Here
There
was
we
the
go.
one,
Yeah.
yeah. Planning for the future. So, and I know we're looking at relatively small sample sizes here, but I just wanted to use this a little bit as the springboard that came out of that to open a conversation, hopefully, about what we can do to plan better for the future, anything that new members would like to see that would make you feel more comfortable going forward, or that our returning members have seen in their experience here that we could improve upon. So any thoughts or feedback on the long range planning aspect of being a board member?
I would say that approving the mission statement, we've always treated that as a policy, and it hasn't been reviewed annually. We did just rewrite it a few years ago, and I consider that still to be the new one.
Yeah, the rewrite was from a scheduled.
Yeah,
10-year
10-year
review.
review.
Now, one thing we've talked about, and hopefully we can get to this year, is on a case-by-case basis, adjusting the review frequency for certain policies,
Yeah.
like some technology-related ones probably need to be more frequent than 10 years. So we could put this in as a 1-year or a 2-year review,
Yeah.
and then it will be an opportunity to pop it open. Yeah.
I'm okay with reviews being cursory, if that makes sense,
Yeah.
that, you know, as an opportunity to familiarize ourselves, to
Yeah.
sort of reorient ourselves, but not necessarily make a project out of it every year.
Well, I was about to say, the fact that it was a 10-year
Mhm.
review allowed for us to feel like it was okay to turn it into a
Mhm.
project, or really say, hey, it's probably time to do a thorough review. But I also agree, you don't want to do that every year.
Right, I wouldn't want that
Yeah.
pendulum to swing so far the other way
Yeah.
that by doing it every year and rubber stamping it, it becomes a
Yeah, you
thing that
never-
we never touch,
Exactly,
right?
that's my comment.
But yeah, if we're only looking at it once every 10 years, is it serving us that well? How at the forefront of our minds as we go
Yeah.
through our year's business is it? Personally, I feel like I could benefit from seeing that more regularly, and at least once a year having a conversation about, is this still our mission?
I think all three of these, I think the second and third here are really tied into the process of our strategic planning, which had always been, it's state mandated that we have a 5-year plan. That's a requirement of the state. So we do have a 5-year plan. But the last 5-year plan, the intention was to review it annually and have it be a living document. So to change objectives that were in there, to, add as new objectives came up or to modify as need be. And I remember having a 5-year plan committee meeting right before the pandemic started. And then it was like, okay, now we're scrambling to adjust to reality. And I think we're at the point now where this is reality and we're ready to pick that back up again.
Yeah.
Right. So I would think that maybe having that group meet more than just once a year for an annual review, where frequently it was just like a list of objectives, like check or no check, like, yes, that's done. No, we're still working on that. Yes, that's done. No, we're not going to do that anymore. Similar to the discussion about the technology plan and the technology department, the technology committees. So I'd be interested in having like that committee meet a little bit more and then talk to the board a bit. Because if there are things that the board wants staff to be focusing on or not, that's where that would come from.
The committee to run it through. Yeah.
But I would throw into that discussion, and I think I recall making a comment to this effect in the text version of this. Reading some of the stuff in the trustee handbook, there was some references to kind of measurables, and that's not really the way the 5-year plan is formatted right now.
Yeah.
There are objectives, and and some of them are explore this or plan for this, or so there's a range of types of activities within the plan, but generally speaking, there's not a concept that I've ever seen of a library dashboard. Here's our even something with collection goals. I think I asked a question a couple of years ago. Hey, we've got some funds and we want to put them toward the collection, but I don't have a good way to assess our collection health. I mean, other than whenever I check out a book, it's either there or it's not, or the whole weight is a certain length, or but there'll be one. You could use this. I'm just using this as one specific example. You could apply this concept to almost anything. Is how do I know if our collection is in better shape, whatever that means? That was one of my questions. What would the metrics even be this year than last year? So we do get some circulation stats sometimes, and there's some trends, which tell us about the demand time. But I'm probably going long-winded on this point. But in terms of reviewing progress, I would like to just put on the table for at least back of our mind a mindset of measurables is what helps you identify progress. And I've been a middle manager before, and it's no fun to be asked to. I'm acknowledging up front, there's overhead involved
in creating and
defining, creating, tracking, and then there's even sort of perverse incentives to manage to the metric rather than manage, if the metric is not the right thing.
Right.
But I think it's worth pointing out, I don't think we do a lot of that. Financially, yes, but in some other areas, I think sometimes we don't do a lot of the sort of measurable.
I appreciate your earnestness about the pitfalls there, but I agree with you. I think all things in moderation, right? And if we're doing none of this, then we're not. We're probably not doing enough of it. So yeah, I'd be very interested to hear your feedback on what is possible, what is feasible there.
I think it's interesting that you picked collections there, because that's like the one facet that we do have a lot of data about. So I think Meredith's on this call here, and she's probably furiously taking notes. The staff does collect a lot of information about the health of the collection and turnover rates and circ per dollar, things like that. So that type of stuff we have, and it's a matter of trying to figure out what appropriate benchmarks to set are, and then we can. So that one is pretty easy. It's the soft skills things, not soft skills per se, but programming. How do you measure the success of? So we had spent some time in the last few years looking at the Public Library Association's project outcome, which is very focused on like how do you. When you're developing programming, how do you set goals for what you want those outcomes to be? So it's not just the metrics like attendance. It's like, okay, the goal here was everybody should leave with a heightened awareness of, literacy or something, whatever that might be. So, I don't think we would need to reinvent the wheel for that. I think that there are tools out there. But as you mentioned, it is a matter of putting it in place and getting it consistent across 8 different locations as well, where they have very different environments and very different clientele as well. So
I was just gonna say, I want to make sure too that the things we're tracking, I think you make a really good point there. But, we as a board don't necessarily need to be concerned about the performance of, to use your example there, individual programming. We need to find, what it is that we're trying to track the success of, as a board, and we want to keep ourselves out of those sort of operational administrative decisions. So maybe we could explore, sorry, go
No,
ahead.
I'm gonna say at the end of 5 years, obviously, we're gonna be looking at this plan and saying, did we do it or not? And
Right.
of course, there's a giant, codicil right there, which says there was a pandemic and lots of things got canceled. So, but the question is, how are we measuring it? What are we looking at and saying, did we do that? When we explored such and such, did we do it or not? Did we do it well or not? And that is the question, just sort of thinking ahead to the next 5 years. What kind of goals are we saying?
Yeah.
Well, so this bullet on the screen is annually reviewing progress. So if that's talking about partial progress
And
as
that was
well.
probably, and he was saying that was in a committee, but
Yeah.
possibly.
Yeah.
Well, I'd be interested in having that committee, which only had
Yeah.
met once a year, basically, to meet more frequently and
Report on progress.
report to the board on
Yeah.
progress.
Well, and figure out what they, this conversation could happen in the committee really. So to figure out what they would need in order to assess.
And I mean,
progress.
maybe there's a to Meredith's point, maybe there's an opportunity because we're midway through that to kind of look at the next few years and try to adjust so that when it's time to, write this whole big new strategic plan, we've got a few years of experience working with the objectives that are already there, but trying to get some more measurable benchmarks in there.
And then also, and then if that committee doesn't do sort of a report every once in a while, at least to the board, to think about having them do that sort of after they've met and had a chance to measure, to say, here's where we are. We're obviously not going to do X because there was a pandemic or because there's no budget for it, but here's how we're working towards other things, and here's where we are, and maybe we're halfway there.
Well, and like you said, I don't think we need to reinvent the wheel on this one. We're, you pointed to in your written comments there, several good resources that sort of lay out, this is the thing you should be doing. I imagine there are other library boards that are doing it, and we can probably find out, what are you tracking? What types of goals do you set for yourselves, and how do you define your success?
Yeah, these plans are very, some of them are 1 page, just like very high level. So like Tony was talking about the state's service levels, like things like that. And then some of them are tremendously detailed. Ours is somewhere in between.
Sorry, we're screen sharing here. I can't see if anybody's got their hand up. Are we missing any additions to the conversation there virtually? Okay.
So I can make one last 1A and 1B comment. I think customer satisfaction could be part of this, and I'm not sure how much of that we do, other than we did a survey for I guess it's every 5 years.
Leading into this, yeah.
I've seen, I forget where it was, but there was one business, or maybe it was even an airport, where as you walk out, because we have a lot of customer interactions, so that every one of those is an opportunity to collect data. There was just a happy face, sad face as you walk out the door. It doesn't, but it's easy for that person then to give you that feedback one way or the other, and each individual happy face or sad face is not going to mean a lot, but you might get a trend over time. There's going to be some variation, and see what that average is. But the other thing I wanted to say is, to the extent we do anything like that, and I would recommend thinking, ultimately, community satisfaction is sort of we're providing a service, and either the community is satisfied or not. And to the extent we can show satisfaction, that bolsters our case for funding. But to the extent we wanted to gather any of that data, it would also be very important to avoid selection bias, meaning we want to not just find out what people who use the library think, but somehow get into the community and figure out what people who aren't using the library think, and that would help us understand why. And this might dovetail with some outreach, some of the outreach type initiatives we're talking about, but just throwing that out there also, we need to,
Yeah,
it's not just who our users we need to please, it's, we want to make sure everybody becomes a user, if they want to, and we want to find out what those bottlenecks are if they're out there.
I think that's a great point. Yeah. Okay, so I want to pursue this in some fashion, but like you say, it's a big conversation. It feels like something that needs to get workshopped a bit in committee before we start bringing something forward to the group here to discuss, what are the goals we want to set? How do we define them? I think we need a framework in place at a committee level.
It might also be helpful to talk to the different jurisdictions.
Yes.
So for instance, Charlottesville sends out something for utility bill
Mhm.
that we could possibly see
Mm,
what they would do. And
Yeah,
maybe they could put a flyer in there that
Mhm.
says, use the library, don't use the library.
Mhm.
Let us know. And that would just be one option.
mhm.
But I imagine
Yeah.
other counties have other.
Albemarle
ways
does it. Albemarle does an annual survey of services basically, and they have a metric, they rank it annually, and the library is included on
Okay.
theirs already. So you can look back, it's in with a couple other like Parks and Rec, things like that. And it's just an overall satisfaction. We used to tie some 5-year plan goals into that, like being high up on that list. And so if they're already asking the question, we can talk to them maybe. And so I think all 5 jurisdictions are doing some version of that. So I think that's a good
That's great.
suggestion.
And if the
Yeah.
question is that information that's available to your staff and to us to look at any
Yeah.
time and think about?
I'm just
Yeah.
imagining the kids in the kids' room hitting the smiley face and saying,
Well, I would like to collect some more
Yeah.
information on this. And
Oh, yeah.
And your point, I mean,
went into that.
I do think it ties in well with, comments that were made during in the self-evaluation there about advocacy and supporting our advocacy efforts. I think data is a great way to do that. So yeah, I'd be interested to hear thoughts on what the best committee to redirect this to for its first, first draft would be. Is this technology-based? Is this something that, helps inform how we're doing on 5-year plan goals? And is the way that the 5-year plan committee meets more regularly by updating these statistics? And no, I know this is a completely, I know, thankfully we have our committee list here in the
Is
packet.
that a goal for the 5-year committee? I'm sorry, I haven't memorized it, but is that a goal for the 5-year upping circulation or customer satisfaction or any of that stuff? Is that-
I'd have to go back and look. I don't know that there's usually a goal about more library cards. So that's one, like increasing card usage. I don't think we have one in the current iteration of the 5-year plan tied to circulation. I don't think, but don't quote me on that.
And that was just one example of a thing that comes to my mind that
Right.
could be
Yeah.
measured. And
Yeah, it's like every month we share with the library staff shares statistics with the board, and those include checkouts per jurisdiction, checkouts per branch, checkouts for the fiscal year,
Mhm.
and library card numbers per jurisdiction, Wi-Fi statistics, things like that. So there's some things that are being collected on a monthly basis. But yeah,
Customer service committee, perhaps.
well, that's a staff committee. So talking about pushing this to the staff, but what I'm hearing is that we want to get board,
Mhm.
like what are the metrics that the board is looking for?
Yeah, eventually it'll have to come back to the board, but yeah, I think, probably not best for a staff committee.
That's from Brittany, the chair of the customer service committee.
Well, if she's volunteering.
But I think that the board would really need it eventually, if we're gonna have to ask for some funding, and it's like ammunition, like, well, we are doing so great, we've got this, that, and the other.
Yes, yeah.
So, but, we want to do more, so we'd like you to give us
Right.
some more money, but.
Yeah, I mean, I have
Or we
these
have people
conversations.
asking for something specific.
Mhm,
What if we have this, I don't know, stuff out, but like, what if people are asking for certain services? We could say, well, we need more funding for that.
Right.
And here are your constituents saying, they want us open till midnight or whatever. I'm just making that up, but you know what I'm saying? We're saying that we could say, oh, we have some support.
No, it came up in several of the conversations that, you know, I had with those of you I was able to get in touch with, and apologies again to anybody I haven't been able to. Yeah, common themes seem to be sort of demonstrating value. That's a, you know, very, very important thing that we all need to be able to do in our funding jurisdictions, is demonstrate the value of the services here. And I think the more data we have, the easier that'll be for us who aren't as intertwined in the day-to-day operations to you know, be able to point to quickly and get value from.
I guess the natural fit for me was the 5-year plan committee.
That's kind of what I'm leaning towards too. Yeah, if this is a thing that helps us track year-to-year goals as a way of achieving, you know, over the 5-year stretch. Now, I think that these things we're talking about tracking are a little bit different than the objectives in the 5-year goal, because we're talking about more, again, kind of, I see the 5-year plan as being that place where we're really working together between the board and you know, and the administrative staff on getting things done. This is going to be a little bit more tracking our success just on our side, and I don't want it necessarily to bleed into how we're tracking your success. You know, like I think those two things need to be a little bit different.
But to me, it answers certain questions. So if
Yes.
in the 5-year plan, I'm wrong, we say we want to up our number of library card users, right? So if we were to look and say, well, why haven't we?
Yes.
What is preventing people from getting a library card, or do they not think that there's a value to it? And so that would let us say, well, we were not able to make it, or we were, and we were because we tried to fix.
Right, and if we
somebody's
weren't
thing.
because there's a perception of, you know, the library, that's the kind of thing that I think we as a board can then identify and say, okay, one of our objectives this year needs to be increasing that, you know, good perception
Right.
to try to fix that problem. And so I think
Right,
these
or
two things
working
can be
together.
kind of related.
Yeah, it sounds like it would be related, but I'm not sure if the board is the one that should be running, you know, whatever this thing, or whether it's a value for the library itself to see it. But it'd be nice, I think we're saying we'd love to see data.
Yeah.
Well, but I'm also with data we need, but also we need a way to, we need some guideposts to interpret the data. So, okay, we had 2% more library cards than last year, making up a number. Is that good? Is that
Right.
bad?
What does it have
You
to
know,
grow?
what does that
every
mean?
year?
So,
Yeah.
so did we have a target in the first place that would have told us?
Right, we were targeting for 5%, we only
Yeah.
got 2, so that's not really a good.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
So just saying 2 doesn't tell me much is
That
kind of
good
the
or not,
point,
yeah.
the point I'm making. But how did, if 5 was the target, how, hopefully there was some thought, there was a reason why 5 was the target, because there was some population growth or we
Yeah.
wanted to, or maybe we want to expand in some area, maybe we, I mean, it's something, David, I know we talked about identifying areas regionally that are underserved. And again, we're coming back to outreach here. It may not be, if we got 2% growth, but it was 0 in these areas
Right.
and -3 in this area and 5 in this area, maybe that's not great either.
No.
Yeah, so
Okay,
data, yes, but
goalposts.
thoughtful
too.
interpretation is necessary, you know, to understand what it means or what the target would be.
Okay, well, thank you all. I really appreciate this. I think that's a great thing to come out of this conversation about the self-evaluation. I would like to see the 5-year plan committee take that up. And I think if we can work through that committee to find if there are examples of this in peer library boards, you know, what kinds of metrics are they using, you know, what kinds of things are they measuring with those, and yeah, put together, you know, if we can get a sort of framework to come back to the board and then have that conversation about what are our goals and objectives. And maybe that's not necessarily something that we do for this year. Maybe it's a framework we get in place before we go into next year or something like that. But yeah, does that sound good? Reasonable? Okay. All right, well, that feels like a transition then to committees. So we'll move ahead. I've made a little bit of a list here. Let's see, Kathy, Lisa, Jim, sorry I didn't get a chance again to chat with you all. There aren't a ton of changes to the list here that is in your packet. Let's see, the budget, we've already gone over. I'm off of that as chair. Tony is our new chair. Wendy, Jim, Lisa, you were all already on it, and we've added Alita, who is completing our representation from all of the funding jurisdictions. Thank you very much. Technology, I had no changes on. That is staying the same. Policy, Carla is no longer with us. So.
That doesn't sound really good.
But otherwise, that has fine, you know, three members there, I thought seemed okay. 5-year plan and personnel were the two with the biggest turnover. Personnel, Carla was our chair, she is gone. Kathy, you are our most senior person on that committee now. So I believe it will fall to you to chair it. And Meredith and Alita, we didn't talk about this on the phone, either one of us, because I didn't get around to it until I was putting this list together the other day, but I realized I had each given you all only one assignment and everybody else had at least 2. So by default, I had to put you both on personnel there with Kathy to get you to 2 assignments as well.
I thought you said you weren't overwhelming us.
I'm trying not to,
I know.
but I needed to get Kathy some help.
All right.
And then the 5-year plan committee, let's see. Tony and Lisa were on that. Tony, you are already our chair of budget. So Lisa, that will be your committee to chair. And Meredith, you had asked to join that one as well.
Can you just repeat that last part again? The title, I am here and listening. I'm just a bit.
Absolutely, yes. Yeah, Lisa, if you don't mind, I've got you as chair of the 5-year plan committee.
Thank you.
That will be you and Tony and Meredith.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Thank you, really, thank you so much. And that.
So you get extra?
You put another one already, aren't you, on the budget?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, so, yeah, Lita, so I've got you on budget and
Budget
personnel,
Personnel.
and I've got Meredith on personnel and 5-year.
Oh, I thought Kathy was. on
She's
5-year.
she's,
No, Kathy's on personnel and policy.
Oh, gotcha,
Lisa's gonna be the chair.
okay.
Tony is our only board member now who has 3. So Tony, if you feel like you are overcommitted, let me know. I'm all ears. But then if that works for everybody, I'll run through it one more time. I've got a budget committee that's got Tony as chair, and then Wendy, Alita, Jim, and Lisa. Tech committee with Wendy as chair, and Jim and Michael. Policy committee with Michael as chair, Kathy and Tony. Personnel committee with Kathy as chair, Meredith and Alita. And a 5-year plan committee with Lisa as chair, Tony and Meredith. And I'll get those to you, David, and we can update everything on the website.
I got it, yeah.
Thank you. Personnel, I believe, will be the next one to need to meet. David, you can talk a little bit more about that probably.
Yeah, the personnel committee needs to meet to review the JMRL manager's budgetary requests for fiscal year 23. So these are operational, kind of basically personnel requests. And the workflow has been for the personnel committee to meet within the next few weeks, basically, like in the beginning of October, and decide whether or not those should be recommended for inclusion in next year's budgets. And then staff will work them into the budget for the finance committee to review before giving it to the whole board. So I'd like to, so it's going to be Kathy as the chair.
Yeah.
So Kathy, I'll call you and we'll work out a time that we can get folks together for an hour or so.
Does that work okay, Kathy?
She is, she's
Okay.
on mute.
All right, well, David, I'll ask you to reach out to her and
Sure, I'll call Kathy.
okay, and thank you all so much. If I didn't have a chance to call you, I will still try. I just want to make sure everybody has a chance to save my phone number and to say hello and just hear how things are going. But no longer will you have to fear that I'm going to press gang you into a committee assignment.
He's already done it.
I've already done it. So thank you all very, very much. Okay, and that will be the last time you'll see that for a while on agenda. David, the director's report.
Sure. So I wanted to mention that the Friends of the Library are having a warehouse book sale coming up. It's going to be October 2nd through October 10th, 10 to 7 a.m. every day. And it's at the old North Side Library. So in the Albemarle Square Shopping Center at the home of the old North Side. They had a very successful sale in July, the halcyon days of July. So this one I think is a bit of a different beast, but there will be more material available and a longer period of time. Masks will be required for entry there. I mentioned earlier today that the All Staff In-Service Day is coming up on the 11th of October. It is going to be all virtual again this year. All trustees are welcome. We will record what we can and have it available. We like to do that. We did it last year as well because staff have to make choices between training, so they'll be able to go back later and see the other ones. I'll send an agenda out to the library board once that's ready as well. COVID response, we continue to see a surge in cases locally. We're still offering full services, but in-person programming, as I mentioned last month, is clearly not where we thought it would be at this point. However, virtual programming is booming and there are outdoor offerings for children at many of our locations. That was the big concern, is children's programming and not being able to really throw ourselves into in-person children's programming. Last Monday, Alita and I were at the Nelson Memorial Library for the grand reopening, I should say, attended by several members of the Board of Supervisors in Nelson, and including remarks by one of the board there. So very good press coverage on that in the Nelson County Times, also the Lynchburg and Charlottesville newspapers. It was a lovely event. Thomas says Kathy saying that works on a chat.
Thank you so much, Kathy.
I received notice this week, or last week rather, that JMRL's application for a state highway marker has been approved, an historic highway marker commemorating the Swanson court case to go up at the central library there, kind of near where the bike rack is. So stay tuned for more information about that. We will likely try to have an event of some sort. This was a partnership with the city of Charlottesville and Albemarle County, of course, co-own the building there, but it's a chance to get that story about the Swanson court case out right on the corner. We don't expect to physically get the sign until December, and then it'll have to be installed and whatnot. So I will keep you updated on that.
Well, those are quite expensive. That's something the city and county are paying for?
The actual cost of it? No, I believe JMRL is paying for that.
Okay.
So should we have a little ceremony?
Yeah, we would like to have a ceremony with the library board and folks from the city, folks from the county, and then also likely from the law school at the university, where Mr. Swanson was an applicant to the law school that was admitted by the law school and then denied entrance by the board of visitors at the university, won a court case at the central library. So very excited about that. That's been in the works for a long time. And yes, more information as we figure out when the timeline for that's going to be. And then I just was going to go over the budget timeline for you, but I think we just did that. We want to get the personnel committee in the next few weeks, and then the budget committee towards the end of October. So the personnel committee will make some suggestions to staff. Administrative staff will put together a first draft of a budget for next year. Budget committee will review that and decide whether or not it needs any tweaking or if it's ready to be sent off to the full board. The full board will have a chance to review and vote on it in November. Okay. So it's likely that the draft won't be ready for your October board meeting, but we'll post it as soon as the budget committee has it. I'll send it out for all of you all to begin review of it. Okay. And it's a proposed draft until basically next spring, after all the jurisdictions have had a chance to go through their budgeting. So frequently it has changes along the way. First pass. I think that's all I have to report today.
Thank you very much, David. Does anybody have any other matters to bring before us that weren't on agenda? Sounds like a no. Yeah, yes, yeah, several times a day. Future agenda items, I didn't pick out too many from the meeting today. We'll kick some work to the 5-year plan committee, but I don't expect that we'll see anything back for quite a while on that. Don't think we have any other pending policies or.
I think the handbook will have a final version. Is that true? Do you think that?
Yes, I believe so.
We're meeting this week to finalize,
Okay.
go over all the input we got from staff and trustees. So as a side note, if you, hopefully all trustees you've had the link. Get your comments in through that interface by Wednesday, ideally, if you have any. But we're going to take that, turn it into hash out kind of a finalized version. And at that point, we would be ready next month for us to, contemplate an endorsement by the trustees.
Okay. Wonderful. We'll look forward to that.
And then there should be reports from both the policy committee, which is meeting before next board meeting, and then the personnel committee will be meeting between now and then as well. If Kathy and I can get that happening.
And that will be the last time we have to hear about the working group. I had to get it in this time because it could get spent every single month.
The working group did a lot of work. It was very efficient.
Okay, well, with nothing else to come before us, do I hear a motion to adjourn? So moved, Tony says. I'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting here at 4:15. Thank you all very, very much for your time. Appreciate everything that you do. And if you do have a chance, please click the link David will send out, take 10 minutes and watch that video from our continuing ed earlier here. And thank you all so much. Take
Thank
care. Have
you.
a great month.
Thank you all. Thanks so much. See you soon.
Thank you, Lisa.